the Johannesburg residents will have to dig deep into their pockets as the new tariffs for municipal services come into effect from the 1st of July. According to the MMC for Finance Dada Morero, the residents will pay 14.97%. That's more for electricity, 9.3% for water and sanitation. Let's get the update now from our reporter Nqobile Madlala, who attended that media briefing. Nqobile, good morning to you. The MMC of Finance, how is he justifying these increases in the face of load shedding? And that also has an impact on water. People experiencing either low pressure in some areas to no water in some instances. Yet, here we are having increases on our rates.
Well, to be quite honest, it's quite difficult to justify that, especially in the face of load shedding as well as shortage of water, Nqobile. In fact, what they did explain to us is that the bulk supply is becoming more expensive, which is, of course, affecting the work that they're doing on the ground, which is mainly why we're finding ourselves with more increase. But I want to bring in City Power because, of course, a lot of people are worried about load shedding as well as the fact that they have to pay month end. Perhaps just explain to us how much will be increased, or what roughly are we looking at?
Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers. City Power increase is going to be 14.97% on average. That means that across the board, most of the customers will experience that specific increase. However, there will be customer categories that might see slightly different increases. And I must be clear that this increase is 14.97% is actually below what NASA said we should have increased our tariff, which is 15.1.
And of course, this is above inflation rates for many homes, especially because there's a lot of issues around cost of living. Tell us how this is going to affect a home that is maybe at 350,000 rand at this point, or even above that. How much roughly are we looking?
For a house, for a home that uses, like, say, 350 kilowatt hours a month, we are looking at an extra 100 rand, extra 100 rand that the person would be paying. Actually, 95 rand that we will be paying extra. But we should also understand that, and yes, indeed, inflation is fairly much lower than these increases that we are looking at. But our cost is driven mainly by bulk supply, which is about more than 75% of our operating cost, and that is increasing by more than 18%. But as the go-between between the bulk supplier and the end customer, we are absorbing some of this because we are only allowed to increase 14.97% at the end. So there is some cushioning that therefore absorption that is happening on our side in terms of the bulk cost.
How are you cushioning it? If you can explain that to us.
If you were getting from Eskom, you would have paid 18% at least, slightly more than 18%. But because you are getting supply from City Power, you then only going to see 14.97%, which is still above inflation, but it's so much lower than the 18% that we see as City Power as the bulk supplier.
And lastly, I understand that at this point you're also looking into buying from people who are creating their own power. How's that going to work?
Yes, there is two programs with respect to that. First one is in terms of embedded generator tariffs. That means the small-scale user that has got rooftop PV panels, which generate essentially for own use, but whatever excess we have, and because sometimes if you are a residential customer, for example, you do not necessarily spend the day at home while you are generating, and that excess electricity you could then sell back to the grid and therefore reduce your end bill that you would be paying to City Power. You will be then credited for whatever you supply at a given rate. And that tariff, we have increased it slightly more to encourage customers to participate in this program, and we will be rolling that out during the course of this year. And the second one is in terms of wheeling tariffs, where we are introducing wheeling tariffs, so therefore third parties that are generating can then be supplying City Power embedded customers and at a willing tariff, which would then mean that the customer will source the energy from somewhere else while we are only providing the network services.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. I want to bring in water here. I'm in Joburg water. A lot of people have complained about water supply, and yet there are increase in tariffs. Tell us a bit how you're explaining that.
Look, obviously it's a concern for everyone, but the cost of actually providing the service is increasing. We've got our bulk water, which is increasing by 9.2%. That's from Rand Water. And as my colleague has actually explained around electricity and energy costs, these are increasing in excess of 14%. And so obviously then the cost of providing the service would increase, and thus justify, the increase in terms of the water service as well.
Tell us, how does electricity increase affect water supply?
Look, we've got different pump stations that run on energy. We also have different plants within our various treatment works. That's for the sanitation part, and obviously these are running on energy costs rather. So these costs, as they rise, they then influence the cost of then running those plants, running those pump stations, and ultimately then they'll translate into a tariff increase.
And roughly, as a small house right now that's in Soweto, for example, how much are they going to be spending by the end of by the beginning of July?
Look, there are different provisions, and that's why our water tariffs are based on an increasing block tariff. That is, if you consume less, you will pay less. And so we are still offering 6 kiloliters for free to all residents. And so if you maintain within that range, obviously you only have to then pay just our demand management levy, which is about 33 Rand. And so, but obviously as you consume more, then you'll obviously then pay more. But in addition to that, we do have social packages which we have introduced. We had the social packages, but now we've increased them in terms of providing more comprehensive packages to the most vulnerable, and this is just to cushion them against some of the increments in terms of the water and the sanitation tariffs.
And in terms of businesses, we know that there are businesses out there that rely heavily on water. How are you going to charge those?
Look, we are reviewing our business tariffs. We acknowledge that it can be quite expensive, and so we are reviewing them, and it's things that we are going to consider in the medium term in terms of ensuring that we can attract the businesses to really do their business within the Johannesburg metropolitan municipality. So these are under review, and I think over the next few tariffs we'll then give some of the proposals to the businesses out there so that we can then get some relief in terms of that as well.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us. That is, of course, Joburg Water as well as City Power, just explaining to us how those tariffs are going to affect you at home, but mainly reliant on the fact that the bulk supply has become more expensive and therefore affecting their operations.
Madlala live for us in Johannesburg there on the back of that media briefing by the MMC for Finance Dada Morero.